Welcome to the 177th episode of the Jami Dulaney Plant-Based Wellness Podcast. My name is Jami Dulaney, and I'm your host. I'm a plant-based cardiologist and endurance athlete living in Southwest Florida. Welcome. As we usually start out with, how's the training going? Tomorrow is September the 1st, and that means just end of the month, it'll be Ironman Chattanooga. So getting close to being ready for the big dance, so to speak. We're getting our 90-plus mile rides in on the weekends and the long runs. I had a little bit of a long run mishap the past weekend. I kind of got a calf cramp when I stopped to answer a page, and it wouldn't kind of let up, so I cut my long run short, but came home, not to panic, because I was fine before I stopped, and it just, all of a sudden, my calf cramped up, and I couldn't get it going again. So I rolled it out, iced, stretched, and the next morning we went on for our long bike ride, and it was a little iffy at start, but the more I biked, the better it got, and then did the old foot in the bucket of ice water a couple times on Sunday and Monday. I really don't like ice baths, but my strength coach said I should, so I did, and all is well, so I've been running without any problems. We're still playing around with nutrition a little bit on the bike. Last weekend, we did a little test with Lara bars versus homemade bars that we refer to as Vin bars for the cat Vincenzo. And our Vincenzo bars had some cacao and walnuts and pumpkin seeds and dates and raisins and cherries in them. And I didn't get the mixture just quite right. And you would say, Doctor, how could you get so many nuts and seeds in your bar? Isn't that bad for you? But I wanted to do a little experiment on taking in a little bit of fat during a ride, because if it's going to be a 12 to 14-hour event and all I take in is 100% carbohydrates, it seems like you have these highs and lows, especially with the liquids after a while. So I wanted to experiment with a little bit of added fats. I also wanted omega-3s. I figured that would be good. Some antioxidants for the days as well. The dates obviously provide, and the cherries, magnesium, a little vitamin C. I actually added a little green tea into those as well. And when we got out on the bike after a few hours and brought the baggies out, there was a little oil hanging around in the bottom of the bag, and realized I got the ratio not right. And I have to admit, as many of you know, if you've taken my nutrition class, I don't measure some of the times. I just kind of eyeball it. So this week I actually measured and sent it to my trusty registered dietitian, Addie Dulaney Meinerich, to do the nutrition facts on. So we've come up with a new formulation that's about 50% carbohydrate and about 30+% fat after I did it. And I'm going to see how that works. You say, that's still a lot of fat, Dr. Dulaney. I didn't think we were supposed to do that. Again, this is going to be for a 7 hours out of a 14, 13, 12 and a half, whatever it ends up being, event. So if you take the rest of the time is going to be carbohydrates, then how, obviously the fat will be diluted out to down in the 15, 20% range. If that works, then next weekend I'm going to take it down a little bit further even. But my thought process, and I've tried to do some scientific research on this, but I haven't found anything as of yet, that when you take in plain carbohydrates, like I tell my patients, if you take, that's like glucose into the sink, and it's going to drain into the muscle, and you have an outpouring of insulin that helps get the glucose into the muscle, and your muscle's going to use that glucose for energy. If there's nothing in that sink to slow the uptake of glucose down, and you get this insulin, and you have this insulin that comes out of your pancreas, I'm thinking that it may absorb too quickly. Now, that may not be entirely right, because obviously you have some blood flow being diverted to your muscles while you're riding, so obviously you don't absorb as well as you would if you were just sitting around. We also know that when you infuse lipids into athletes, they do have a decreased glucose uptake, which is kind of like a glucose intolerance. Now, I don't want to give myself glucose intolerance, but I think that I would like, and I think I did experience somewhat a little bit of a slow drip of the insulin, a little bit of a slow drip of the glucose into my muscle cell as we were riding, and so it seemed to be steady. I didn't have any of the lows and such that you get when you're riding 5-6 hours where, okay, I need to take something in, and then you take your glucose in and you kind of wait for it to right itself. So I didn't really experience any of those. So I'm going to keep experimenting as we decrease the amount of walnuts and pumpkin seeds in that mixture to see if there's any change with how I feel like my glucose uptake is. So that's that. And again, we have a few more long rides, a few more long runs. I'm going to be going with Addie Dulaney Meinerich, my registered dietitian, to the International Plantrition Conference in San Diego the second week of September. So we'll let you know how that goes, and obviously it'll be more of a run week that week. As far as the backyard garden here, mango season's drizzling down. We're getting little mangoes planted, but nothing much is happening. A few tomato plants that aren't doing anything, a few pepper plants that aren't doing anything, and we're just kind of in limbo. I've got some greens and herbs on the porch, but we just have to wait till this hot weather starts to cool off, and more the humidity. Apparently when the humidity and the heat doesn't go down at night, it's difficult for things to bloom and produce fruit. So we are in the non-garden season down here in Florida right now. Last week I talked about your VO2 max and what it was at age 50 and how it might predict longevity in males that were followed for 43 years. And the higher their VO2 max, and that being in the 50 was the high, the better they did. This week I found an article from the Journal of Clinical Oncology looking at the cardiorespiratory fitness and incidence of lung and colon cancer from the FIT cohort, which is a group of people in the FIT project looked at 69,885 people over a period of 1991 to 2009, and the researchers went back and looked at people aged 40 to 70 that were cancer-free at baseline. They came up with 49,143 people that they could look at with a mean age of 54 over 8.3 years. And over that time, 388 people developed lung cancer, 238 developed colon cancer. And what they found was, compared to those people with the lowest cardiorespiratory fitness, the highest group had a 77% decrease in developing lung cancer and a 60% decrease in developing colon cancer. They did not look at VO2 max, but they looked at what a simpler measurement of fitness, that being METs, of what, and it's METE, metabolic equivalent units, that you get on a Bruce protocol. So we do it was typically a exercise treadmill test. And if you've ever had a stress test, every 3 minutes it gets a little bit, the incline goes up and the speed goes up until you can't go anymore. And every 3 minutes that corresponds to so many metabolic units or activity units. And so if you can do, it kind of works out to 10 minutes on a Bruce protocol. It's kind of like the equivalent of shoveling snow or digging dirt. So if we get somebody over 10 METs, that's a good functional capacity and has a great predictive value for not having any cardiac events in the next year. But these people use the METs to look at the cancer risk, and so their low was less than 6 METs, and their high was greater than 12 METs. So less than 6 METs is about 4 minutes on a treadmill, Bruce treadmill test if you've ever had one. Greater than 12 is getting up there about 12 minutes. So that was obviously that's a good level of cardiorespiratory fitness. When we have people that can go 12 METs, we're pretty happy that things are going to be okay in the next year. So it's just another way of looking that, again, not only do you improve your overall mortality by being fit, but also your ability to get things that you wouldn't expect as far as lung cancer and colon cancer. There was another study that in the Medical Science and Sports Exercise journal that looked at predictors of exercise dropout. And, that's always a big problem. People start exercise programs and then they stop. That's kind of why American Heart Association dumbed down exercise. They figured if they told people to exercise every day, there's no way they would. So they kind of dumbed it down to if you can exercise 3 days a week, then you'll, do better than people that don't exercise at all. But, as most of you know, that 3 days a week, was that Monday, Wednesday, or Friday, or was I'm going to exercise on Saturday and Sunday and Tuesday, and then you get a 2 or 3 days skipped in between, and the next thing you know, you're not doing anything. So that 3 day a week, to try to keep that going for years on end is pretty difficult. But they looked at, the predictors of exercise dropout in the study, and there was 11% dropout, and this is looking at people that are supposed to be in an exercise study over 3 years, and what they noted was lower education, a lower grip strength, lower physical activity at baseline, and lower cardiorespiratory fitness at baseline were all big predictors of why people would actually drop out of exercise programs. And that, that seems fairly intuitive, but nevertheless, it is a huge problem. If you're in bad shape, or if you've ever been injured and then you have to go back, it's kind of dread. You go back to a slower pace than you were before, or maybe it hurts, the first couple of days, and you decide to take days off because you're sore, or maybe you go out and do too much and you re-injure yourself. So, if your exercise fitness is not very good, it's really hard to get started. You feel frustrated. You may have remembered when you were in good shape and you can't believe that you're this bad and you don't want to face it. I know when I have been injured in the past and I have to go to walking, and you're walking down the road and then people come by that you kind of, I've been doing a similar path for probably 10 years in my neighborhood, more or less, take a few blocks here and there depending on my distance. But when I'm walking and people pass me in cars that I know that have seen me running before, I kind of want to scream out and say, hey, I'm injured, that's why I'm walking. I feel bad that I'm walking because I usually run. It shouldn't make any difference at all, moving and getting out and moving, but it's still very frustrating, and so you have to take that into account when you're starting back again. Just being out there is a plus, and pat yourself on the back for getting started. And I still love the calendar that you can write down every day that you do it. And I still like going for a short period of time, 7 days a week, rather than this Monday, Wednesday, and Friday thing. And then, this grip strength, it's very interesting. I heard a gymnastics coach talk one time about grip strength and overall strength and fitness, muscular fitness. And as you may know, or think about, you lose grip strength pretty quick, and that's one of the things that people complain about. They can't get a jar open, they can't grip something to turn. That their grip strength goes quick, and it is a sign if your grip strength's going that you need to start working on your muscular fitness, and so that's another thing to focus on. And you can buy the little grippers that, they still sell them, that you can work on your grip strength, or just, do tackle those jars. Mobility with your hands, mobility with your wrist is good. And it's been shown in a study that if you contract your hands or you grip, you actually generate more strength in all of your body parts because you're calling upon the fascia that's all connected. So when you're doing an exercise, do increase your grip so that you can increase your general strength, and that you are paying attention to your hand muscles. So that's a good thing to get going. And then a lot of people just haven't been real exercisers. Even maybe they didn't play sports when they were young. And it's you just have to take that into account and try to find something that you enjoy. Running's always been my favorite exercise for release of stress. It's my happy place when I can go out and run and don't think about the troubles, solve problems, come up with ideas. And that's really the key to finding out what does that for you, whether it's biking, dancing, walking, running, yoga, whatever you can do to find that, because that really helps out with getting exercise started, that you can do something that's really a good release to you. And then you can also associate that release with, hey, my day is always better when I do that to start my day out. So, play around with different exercises till you find the ones that, you like, that's going to really give you that release, so that you can, it just helps. It's again, good self-motivator. I've been listening to a book by Malcolm Gladwell, What the Dog Saw. I'll list it in the show notes. It's a really good book. But it's basically, the idea is what you see is not always what you see, and it's not always what is there, or sometimes things are there that you don't see. And one of the things that they looked at was the homeless population, and we do food kitchens and food banks and shelters. And the reality of it is there's about 10% of the homeless that are really chronically homeless, and a large portion of people are homeless for very short periods of time. And they found in several cities that if they look at this 10% and they actually get them places to live, and they intensify their therapies and treatments and support for this, lower percentage of people, then they can really save a tremendous amount of money and, obviously help more people, because they're really identifying what they need to do with a specific population and give them the attention that they need. But it's not a lot of the times what we necessarily do. We try to treat that, that bell curve. Everything's based on a bell curve, and we try to treat the middle of the bell curve and hope that the edges of the bell curve fit in. And I thought that was a lot like reversing lifestyle diseases in some respects, and that we try to throw, obviously plant-based nutrition is, it kind of treats all comers. It reverses diabetes, hypertension, autoimmune diseases, decreases the risk of cancer, decreases the risk of cancer recurrent, arthritis. I mean, there's so many things that it treats, obesity. So it's kind of a one-stop shopping for, the best diet out there, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as the scientific literature is concerned, as far as, what I read and believe. But yet there are people on both edges of that bell curve that maybe we have difficulty in actually succeeding with. And so why is that? Why can't we just throw a book on plant-based nutrition? You're listening to this podcast. Why aren't you 100% plant-based in your ideal body weight? And, why do you have vascular disease? Why didn't this work? Why can't we stick to it? Where are the problems? And sometimes we're not looking at the root cause. And a lot of that may have to do with, how we actually see ourselves. And, are we worthy of so much attention to really get our lives together? If our spouses want to eat meat, then we'll just eat meat because we're not worthy of not eating meat and not taking care of ourselves. Or whatever reason that we deem ourselves not worthy of treating ourselves to the degree that we would want to care for somebody else. There was another book that I'm reading, 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson, and he talked a little bit about, or gave an example. If you have a dog that got sick, and people will give that dog its medicine and not miss the pills, but oftentimes people don't even fill their own prescriptions, let alone take them on a regular basis. And how much does this have to do with we just don't see ourselves worthy of such specialized attention? And it's kind of benign neglect in some respects. We spiral into just eating junk food. Obviously, the environment plays a role, that what we are exposed to, how we set up ourselves up for success or failure with planning. But nevertheless, I think, it would be worth looking inside a little bit to see whether or not you're actually treating yourself as good as you treat your car or you treat your dog, or you would like your family members to actually treat you, because it has to start with you and how you treat yourself and what kind of message you're sending out, that, hey, I'm worth it, and I'm going to take care of myself, and I'm going to eat plant-based, and I'm going to stay healthy. That in turn allows you to do for other people but it also sends the message out to other people that I'm not swaying in my desire to do this. I'm not making exceptions just because you want to eat whatever it is that you want to eat, junk food, animal products. If you don't want to take care of yourself, I feel bad about that, but it's nothing I'm not really the guy in charge of you. So I'd have you look at that maybe over the next week, and if you have any thoughts on that, I love an email about how you think about it, because we certainly have a lot of people in the practice or that's been around the practice or I've spoken with that just have trouble keeping on their own plant-based nutrition path because of other people. And they blame the other people, but sometimes they also send that mixed message that sometimes I will, sometimes I won't. If only you would do this, then I could do this. But the reality of it is we need to stand up and take care of ourselves first so that we can demonstrate that we're capable of taking care of other people. There was another study that I looked at from the Harvard School of Public Health that looked at smoking and the risk of diabetes. And as we all know, when people quit smoking, they tend to gain weight. And they gain the most amount of weight in that period of time, about 2 to 6 years after they quit smoking. And in that time period, there's about a 68% increase in the risk of diabetes. And then that weight gain and that risk peaks at about 5 to 7 years and then kind of levels off. And in another study cited from Sweden, they also looked at, if people were diabetic and everything else was fairly well controlled, they took their medications, they took their blood pressure medications. Of course, the risk of, if they smoked, their mortality risk was much greater. And that seems to be, a no-brainer. If you have diabetes and you smoke, then you're going to be worse off if you don't, because you're accelerating your vascular disease. But the weight gain in diabetes might be a little bit surprising, and you're like, oh, well, they just put on a bunch of weight. But there was an interesting study done many years ago, and I don't have it in front of me, but they looked at waist-to-hip ratio. We know that people that are shaped more like apples tend to have a larger waist than their hips, so that we call it that waist-to-hip ratio greater than 1. And so genetics play a bit of a role, that, some families are shaped like pears, some people are shaped like apples. But they looked at skinny smokers, and even though people that smoked used to be on the skinny side for the most part, they still had an increased hip to waist ratio. So their fat distribution changed when smoking to that of a more unhealthy weight distribution. So they have more abdominal fat to start with, and so when they gain weight, they continue to put it on, in these areas. So it kind of makes sense that smokers would have a higher risk of getting diabetes for a given weight gain than people that don't smoke that gain weight, because they tend to put it on in bad spots. We've had several new people join the practice over the past couple of weeks, many of which are diabetic, and it's always fun to see just how quickly we can reverse their diabetes and see their glucose come down. We've seen glucoses come down from the 280s and 300s down into the low 100s just in a matter of weeks without some of the people are on no medications, and we just kind of started from scratch, and other people came to me on medications, and we're weaning those off. And it's actually easier if people aren't on medications to kind of get things under control in some respects, because they don't have the crutch. So they have to really stick true to the diet to get those glucoses down. And just by taking the oil out, even obviously they haven't lost all the weight that they need to lose, but just by taking the oil out of their diet, the glucose goes into the muscle cells so much easier that their glucoses come down. And, we don't limit anybody's fruit intake. We encourage beans and rice, high fiber, lots of greens, the 4 to 5 cups of greens a day. So they don't have any plant-based restrictions other than we get rid of the oil and limit the nuts to just a few walnuts on the breakfast or a salad at lunch, and a tablespoon of flaxseed a day. But they still are doing really well. And a lot of times when people are on some of the oral agents, and if you've experienced this, the problem is that a lot of these oral agents keep the liver from making any glucose or decrease the liver's ability to make glucose, and so people can have lows. And there's nothing worse than that afternoon low of a glucose when their glucose spikes way up and then it comes and drops way down. And typically your liver would put out a little bit of glucose to keep things around that 100 range. But when you're on some of these medications, it blocks it and people get lows and they have to eat and they have to chase it. So, that's why we follow people very closely so that we can avoid the lows and adjust their medications accordingly. But it's great fun to watch how quickly this turns around with just changing what people eat. And it's just a matter of keeping them on track. We've been on a hiatus from nutrition class because of finishing one class and the holidays and a little bit of travel, and we have people that come and go. So we're starting our nutrition classes up next week, and that makes it a whole lot easier because people get a lot of support when they come in and they have continued learning. We also know that people that come to class do better quicker than people that are doing this on their own because at least that one day a week they have a lot of support. And sometimes when they get home, they don't have that much support, and they're kind of floundering on their own, or people are trying to interject what they should be doing. But so far this new group we have is doing really good. So it's a pleasure to work with them and watch their glucoses come down. The other thing I saw, surfing the internet a little bit. Actually, today was a study published in New York Times looking at extreme eating. And that seems to be a hobby of a lot of people nowadays. Whether you look on the news channels when they have the segments, typically on Friday morning, some of the news shows, or, the early evening before the weekends, on, just how gooey and oily and sugary and fatty people can make foods. And they were looking at, we all know that fast foods tend to be high salt, high fat, and everybody blames McDonald's, which certainly they are a big, culprit in a high fat, high salt, fast food, poor nutrition world. But as far as calorically dense, they don't compete with a lot of places near as much as you would expect. And what I didn't know, we don't have a cheesecake factory here. It's one that's up in Sarasota. It's about an hour away. But now the Cheesecake Factory apparently has breakfast burritos, and they did win the competition for the most extreme amount of calories this year. They have a breakfast burrito that has in a tortilla shell with egg and bacon and chicken chorizo, cheese, potatoes, avocados, peppers and onions, and ranchero sauce. It clocks in at 2,730 calories, so more than most people should have in a day, and 4,630 milligrams of sodium, and 73 grams of saturated fat. And if you look at 73 grams of saturated fat, and take that times 9 calories per gram, that gives you 657 of those calories are from fat. That's a whopping load of fat in the morning, or any time for that matter. If you go on further, it comes into a close second, Chili's Honey Chipotle Crispers and Waffles. They are a Belgian waffle with battered chicken and bacon, jalapenos, chili ranchero fries with a honey chipotle sauce, 2,510 calories, 40 grams of saturated fat, 4,480 milligrams of salt. This I have to say, this is gluttony. Anybody that would consume this and not understand that they were just eating terribly. The one thing, the 2015 winner, though, I have to say, people might be a bit confused, was the Red Lobster. And the thing that was highest on them was their create your own shrimp combo, which I've seen before there, many moons ago. Came in at 2,710 calories with 6,530 grams of salt. Milligrams of salt. And the combo that they listed, but I mean, again, create your own combo was any of these really racked up the calories and the fat calories, but one was a Parrot Island jumbo coconut shrimp and then one was Walt's favorite shrimp, and then a shrimp linguine with Alfredo sauce. And of course, you could even make it worse when you added the Caesar, fries, Cheddar Bay biscuit. So those are really their standard menu items that are so high in calories. And that is really, really scary because we have one in this town and the parking lot is always filled. There's just, I tell people there's nothing that they can eat at the Red Lobster and be healthy. I've been there before as far as a salad goes way back when, and I'm pretty sure it was just iceberg lettuce and that's all you got, on the size of a saucer. In a potato would come loaded with butter and salt. So it really is a place where you just can't go and eat healthy, and there's a lot of places like that. I think that the Cheesecake Factory does have some vegan options, but again, when you're looking at vegan options, a lot of times, again, when you start doing guacamole, that's very high calorie, high fat. The oil that they add into the dressing. So you really have to ask for these things with the dressing on the side, no guacamole. Obviously stay away from French fries, and obviously stay away, I don't know if they make a vegan cheesecake, but it's not going to be healthy, so you have to stay away from that. So, it really, these places aren't some place that you can go safely and eat things. And it is very, very disturbing because I don't think people realize just how many calories they consume, because if they go and they eat a shrimp dinner, they don't think it's quite so bad because, the portion size aren't extreme in some of these things, but the oil and the fat content are extreme. I don't think people think of coconut shrimp as being a terribly unhealthy fish dinner, but it is truly very, very high in fat. And of course, all the sodium that they pour on things, because again, they're taking basic foods that are mediocre taste and putting a tremendous amount of fat and salt on them to kind of make them taste good, making the portion size look big so people say, wow. And it is wow, all right. It's a wow on the way to your hospital with your heart attack. Please, 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 please don't be involved in extreme eating. That is just, it's really a sad thing. It makes me sad when I see people post on Facebook, little kids into these really high fatty foods, fatty drinks, big whipped cream topping on their drinks, because it's just setting them up for adult onset diabetes at a very, very early age. I also think you need to be really aware of things that have like a honey chipotle sauce. It's not going to be just a little dab of honey. This is a giant squeeze, lots of honey into these things, making it very, very sweet, very, very calorically dense. And, just because it's honey and it comes from a bee doesn't mean it's any better than coming from a sugar beet or sugar cane. It's all simple sugars that again, associated with fat is really going to be, this is a hyperglycemic nightmare. It just kind of blows my mind of just how bad this actually is. And to close you with a healthy suggestion, we love chickpeas, we love beans of all kinds, but a shout out to the Palouse chickpea company in Washington State. You can order chickpeas from them. They're really, really fresh, and we like getting the big burlap bags of the chickpeas and soak them. And this weekend I did a chickpea falafel, and I do that just by mashing the chickpeas up. Sometimes I add sweet potato. This week I didn't, and I add parsley and garlic and turmeric and cumin, and make this into a patty. I'll put a little bit of whole wheat panko on top just as I get ready to bake it, so it makes it a little crunchy on the outside, and that makes a really good falafel. And then I made a tabbouleh salad to go with that, and tabbouleh with parsley, again, nitric oxide producing, barley, cucumbers, tomatoes, and lemon juice. If you like onions and you're not allergic to them, you can put those in there as well. It makes it good. But that's a great dinner, and that, we had that on Sunday and had lots for lunch. And even, to make cakes of any kind, whether it's zucchini-based cakes or beet burger cakes, I kind of stay away from that burger word because, it connotates something different. But bean burgers, or bean cakes, jackfruit burger-type cakes, zucchini cakes, falafel. These are great to have. You typically, one recipe will make 8 or 10 of them, and they freeze. They all freeze really good, but it's nice to have for lunches the next week so that you can just take a big bowl of greens and put one of these cakes on top and some other vegetables, and you have a nice healthy salad. So consider, making some of those so you have, a lot of people like to batch cook, and I'm not a real fan of batch cooking because I think people get bored with what they make after they've made so much of it. But in the context of having some of these cakes or burgers around, I think they're a good thing to have to add on. It makes for a quick lunch. When I come home and I can just take one out of the freezer, microwave it for a couple of minutes, and it's good to go. So that's a good idea. And then along with, we make a soup every week. We have at least some kind of soup that we have that you can use for lunch, or you can use for another quick dinner. You can repurpose it, use it with a baked potato, make some polenta and put over it. So having a soup ready every week is really helpful to make the week, and as far as menu planning go well. And then just plan so that you're not sabotaging yourself. Make sure you have the greens that you don't have to worry about. Buy a couple of the big tubs of the greens so you have them ready to go, and you don't have to go to the store a million times. Because when you start having to go to the store, one, if you're tempted, if you're really hungry, and you get there, or you'll say, "I'll just go out." And there's nothing that can sabotage getting rid of medications much worse than going out to dinner multiple times a week, because you're going to be exposed to oil, and the temptations are going to be there. So try to eat at home, and plan accordingly. So up in the next couple weeks, I have some really exciting guests. I have a internist, infectious disease expert coming on to talk about her experience with multiple sclerosis personally, and I have Dr. Pam Popper in the wings to talk about ADHD and the awful things that some of these medications do to kids, and some alternative therapies or alternative ways to handle this. We're inventing a lot of diseases so that pharmaceutical companies can make drugs for. And, there are a lot of ways around ADHD without taking medications and exposing these kids to all the side effects associated with them. And, even for that sake, adults with hypertensive medications, antihypertensive medications, there have been recalls in the past couple of weeks that have become more and more widespread. Even some cancer associations with some of these medications have been on the market for years. So it's best not to have to take these medications. Don't think them as, a quick fix. They're not. How do you deal with it? Most of the time there's a nutrition way around this, but certainly not with extreme eating and sedentary behavior. So, there are a lot of ways around having to take medications for chronic illnesses, and especially for illnesses that may have been manufactured somewhat by the drug industry. So I'll leave you with that. Please check out the website at drdulaney.com, DoctorDulaney, and email me at jami@drdulaney.com with any questions. I'd love to hear from you, any suggestions, and I would like to hear from you if you're having any problems with people getting in the way of you taking good care of yourself. So let me know how you're doing, and go out and get some exercise, get some sunshine, eat your greens. I'll talk to you next week.